Welcome, everybody. This is Hugh Massie, the Executive Chairman and founder of DNA Behavior International. And today I'm delighted to be hosting another Behavioral Economics Today podcast. And, in these podcasts, we're exploring the intersection of psychology and economics, and particularly how can we take that from research to practicality? How does this affect every part of an organization and every transaction, instance, digital app, you name it? There is behavioral economics at play and human behavior at play. So I'm delighted today to have with me Soraya Catoja and Ann-Kathrin Crede, and you'll hear me call her Anka because that's how she goes by. But we're going to have a very engaging conversation about how about the behaviorally informed insurance company. And I think Allianz, and I followed Allianz in a number of areas for years, is really at the forefront of implementing behavioral economics into every part of the business. And it's really a showcase of how leadership have embraced behavioral economics, but also how it's delivered results. And Anka and Soraya will talk about that. So Anka, do you want to just talk about a little bit about your background and your story of how you connected to behavioral economics and made it your life?
Yes, of course. Hi, you. Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks a lot for having us. For us, it's a real pleasure to be part of this podcast. So yes, my name is Anka. I'm originally from Germany, but I've been living in Switzerland for more than 10 years now. I'm currently based in Zurich, where I live with my husband and our son. And whenever I get a little bit of free time, you usually find me doing some kind of sport or being outdoors. Now, how did I enter the field of behavioral economics? I actually started out studying French with economics only as a minor, but I quickly realized I was more interested in economics. And I think it was by pure chance that my microeconomics professor offered a bachelor thesis topic on applying behavioral economics to public policy. And this was the very first time I dove very deep into the literature, and I became so fascinated by this whole new world of human decision making. And somehow from there on, I knew I wanted to become a behavioral economist. And that's why I continued in the field throughout my master's all the way through my PhD, which was also the reason back then why I moved to Switzerland. I generally really enjoyed the academic world, doing foundational research. However, I realized I was missing the practical side. So I wanted to see all these valuable insights applied to really solve real world problems. And this was one reason why I decided to leave academia and moved into consulting. And as in my first job as consultant, it was during COVID, so it was a especially interesting time. I would bring behavioral insights to inform public policy, and we worked on questions such as how can we get people motivated to get tested or vaccinated. And it became very clear that the COVID challenge was also a human behavior change challenge. And yeah, last but not least, I moved on to Allianz when the Global Center for Behavioral Economics was newly founded. And it's been more than 4 years now that I'm with Allianz. And I think we will come into more detail what we are exactly doing. But so far, it was a really interesting and insightful and rich journey for me. And yeah,
Yeah,
looking
you've
forward to
really
talking about it.
you've really made a big pivot, haven't you, from a research focused career to public policy, and now essentially consulting that's internal and external. Um,
Yeah,
and
kind of. Yes.
it's interesting how these pivots come. I think sometimes it is it is a chance meeting or interaction. Uh, and I know that for me, having been originally a CPA and now dealing with human
Mhm.
behavior for the last 25 years, it was a chance interaction in some way. But in a way, it wasn't chance. It's deep inside you, uh, when it's there. And luckily, I got to explore it. And so just turning to you, Soraya, you're the leader of the Decide division, and was the first employees in there, or the first person to come into the Decide arm at Allianz. So just tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got there.
Yeah, happy to. So I started out studying economics at the University of Zurich. And similarly to Anka, I realized early on that all the models, right, on standard decision making didn't fully explain how individuals actually behave, right? And honestly, for me, that was kind of frustrating. So that then changed when I took a course in neuroeconomics, because suddenly the focus shifted to the brain, right, where decisions are actually formed. And I became really fascinated by how the brain works, and actually also how it drives us to do things or not do things, and also how habits are formed, etc. And from there, then behavioral economics was kind of the next step that made the most sense, because it combined economic decision making, psychology, and also neuroscience in a way that is directly applicable to the reality, to kind of real world problems. So during my master thesis, then I worked with in a big research project with several applied microeconomic professors. And seeing how to actually design this huge natural field experiment and test our hypothesis in the real world was then the real turning point for me. And being involved in this research project for, I think it was almost 1.5 years, led then directly to an entry position or a lead position at the behavioral laboratory at the Department of Economics at the University of Zurich, which then gave me even more experience in designing experiments, also like learning more about how to collect data to then empirically test all those behavioral theories. And what brought me to Allianz was, I think, a moment of perfect timing, because my flatmate at the time, he worked as a trainee at Allianz. He mentioned one evening, rather late, that Allianz Switzerland was starting this behavioral insights unit, right? And I applied the same night, and luckily became the very first person to join the team. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So you just knew really right then and there, instantly, intuitively, this is the thing for me, and
yeah.
you were.
I knew when he explained to me what the role was about, what they're trying to do, because he had more insights, right, on what Allianz was building. It got me hooked instantly, because it was exactly what I wanted to do, working on practical challenges, right. Not necessarily in the beginning in an insurance, but as soon as I heard what kind of challenges there actually are out there across the whole value chain, I knew this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's interesting, for me, on this, the journey really, the journey commenced very early, because I was a CPA providing tax advice, and somehow I, with a bit of reflection, realized that my secret sauce was how I personalized the presentation of the advice to the client. So it wasn't just that I was good at tax law; that was really, in a way, the product. It was more how it got presented, and understanding intuitively the decision-making biases of the people, whether they really had the risk appetite would have been one, the confidence to, and all of the other biases, a lot of people did what other people did, following the herd. I sort of intuitively understood all of those things, and that was my secret sauce. And then I had a wealth management business, and I deployed that thinking to how I dealt with families. But then it really came up one day. Someone asked me, "What are you passionate about?" Well, I want to help people be financially self-empowered, and I knew that was behavioral. Um, and so
Yeah, that's
that's
really interesting. So it's everywhere, right? Every decisions we take, whether it's small or big, there is a behavioral a component in it, right?
right.
So
Behind every product, every service, every
everything, yeah.
solution, there's human behavior, and I think, what I knew is that if you could understand that earlier, it makes you more efficient and you can deliver more value. And I think that's really what leaders need to hear, and to understand and to see the results of. And I know that you've proven that in Allianz, and maybe we should jump into the Allianz story of actually how, the Decide unit in Allianz got built and how it's progressed.
Yeah, maybe I can take that, as I was part of it, like right
Yeah.
from the beginning, right? So how did it all start? So I think it was, or everything started with our manager, Christian Steininger, who at that time was head of customer excellence at Allianz Switzerland, because he started to use behavioral science to address challenges within Allianz Switzerland, right? And this was long before behavioral science had an actual seat at a table or was actually embedded into the organization. So early use cases focused on things like how to reduce fraud, right? How can we get people to report their claims honestly, or supporting customers in making better decisions when choosing a resolution after they submitted a claim, things like that. And because those insights proved quite relevant, not only in the Swiss context, but outside as well, the work then gained international attention. And as a result, we then became a global group center early on. I think it was 2 months after I started, and we then offered our expertise to Allianz entities globally, like worldwide. And what made our approach back then especially powerful, I think, was that we made it really efficient. So many of the things we did were interventions that were rather small, often around tweaking words, framings, moving around choices, right? Creating a different choice architecture, and easy to implement. And by easy, I mean we didn't use a lot or very limited actually IT resources. So as more and more projects followed, our reputation got stronger and stronger, and we were then more and more seen as experts that you should involve as soon as you have your challenge has a behavioral dimension. And as you just said, right, there's a lot of them. Many do. Many challenges have this behavioral dimension or component. And I think what was then the true turning point was when we were able to demonstrate a 17-fold return on investment,
Yeah.
because that was the moment when our unit became seen as or associated, connected with, hey, they can create value, right? We weren't just they're nice to have units, to a really, hey, this creates a robust business case for us if we involve them. So yeah, after that demand grow and grow, we were involved in lots of redesigns, customer journeys, but also internal challenges. We did a lot of trainings, but also were able to be involved in bigger topics on a more strategic level. And I think the secret sauce, or looking back, what brought us to where we are right now, or the right sponsors, the right timing as well, and then the right people, and to be honest, also a bit of luck in the end.
That's
I think.
probably everything in life, is everything's got to connect. But I think there's something very powerful that you've just said there, Soraya, for others to hear, is that when you bring behavioral economics in, people could hear that as really heavy. Oh, this is research based and we're going to turn upside down the whole organization and we've got to deal with people. But really what you were doing was very small tweaks that had an enormous impact in a particular business division. And that was really the winning stroke. In a way, it was sort of my word right now is making it frictionless in a lot of ways. Even though there are areas that do require some major work, you made it easy for them to do it, to implement. So Ann-Kathrin, do you want to just sort of go through a little bit more of how behavioral economics is integrated into the business and is really part of co-building solutions more?
Yes, of course. So very generally, we are like an in-house behavioral consultancy, right? An in-house unit. And what we usually do is that we partner directly with operational entities or business owners. And our main goal is to help them solve their internal goals, right? We are not doing or we are not working on something we feel is interesting, but we work on topics that are relevant to them. And whenever we start a project, we usually go through 3 different phases. The first phase is what we call the behavioral audit. There we want to clarify the objective. So what do we actually want to achieve? What are target behaviors we have in mind? We also look at, okay, how does the current, for example, customer or employee journey look like? And I think most importantly, we identify the behavioral barriers that keep people from behaving the way as we intended. That's the behavioral audit. Based on that, we enter the redesign phase where we co-create solutions and reshape the choice architecture in a way that makes it easier for people to behave in the intended way or more intuitive. And I think what is very important here, we really co-create these solutions with our clients because we made the experience that their local and context knowledge is very crucial to design something that is really effective. And that's something that our clients really appreciate being part of it. The next phase is testing and validation. Whenever possible on our client side, we try to test the solutions we design to make sure we do not only rely on our gut feeling, but that they really work and prove successful. And this is something not so easy because, bringing in this testing mentality is often something new for our clients. So what else is important for our work? As usual consultants, we also take care of things like stakeholder management. We do the scoping at the beginning of a project. We align on success metrics. So how do we actually measure whether an intervention we have designed is really successful? And we are also partnering with many divisions such as IT, legal and compliance, and so on. And I think what is important or what we try to do are to really collaborate closely with the client and share learning so that they really understand what we are doing and that they might even be able to apply some of these insights later on after our collaboration has ended.
Yeah.
And one yes, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just acknowledging that, I agree with what you were saying.
Yes. And maybe one last sentence. So what we think sets us a little apart from general consulting is that our ambition is to really provide end-to-end support and not just leave the client at the end with a PowerPoint deck and some recommendations, but we also want to support in embedding, in implementing, and sometimes even scaling the solutions. And in some cases, we even stay in touch with the client after a collaboration has ended to see what are long-lasting effects of our work. And this is much easier for us as we are in-house, right?
Yeah, and that's really the co-building that you're talking about and not just being a researcher or a report writer
Exactly.
or just providing an idea.
Exactly.
And
And
and I think one thing that I was thinking of that maybe is important to stress for the audience, and you can confirm this, is it seems that the greatest value of behavioral economics ideas when an organization is looking at it is on the customer side of the fence, because we so often think of human behavior as an HR function and employee engagement and culture, and they are very important, but really the greatest value in my mind is on the customer side, and that's where the greatest risk to revenue is if you don't get something right, and the greatest opportunity sits. Is that
yes, I would say it's a very important part, looking at employee behavior, but luckily there are more groups. So we are also looking at, for example, tied agents, brokers. We are also looking at employees. So the people we are looking at, it's very broad, which makes it also very interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the work I've done is helping the salespeople,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to call it, sell better, interact better with
Yes.
the customers. And that's an important area, but it's still customer facing as opposed
Yes.
to just who is hired in the right role. Now that's also important, but that's and there is behavioral economics work to be done on how you incentivize employees and how you get them to change. But I think the big value sits on the customer side. Um,
Yeah,
of the
I
fence,
agree.
voice of the customer, how the products are rolled out. And in that regard, Anka, do you want to just say anything about the health app that you worked on and sort of digital adoptions?
Yes, maybe I hand over this example
Yep.
to Soraya because she
Yeah.
knows it much better
Yeah.
than
Yeah,
I do.
that's
Right. Yeah.
fine. No, I can
No.
take it over. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's go into that example from health insurance. So, the, for context, right? What customers need to do there is that you need to pay your medical bill upfront, right? And then submit the invoice later on to get reimbursed. So that for the context. And Allianz offers a really nice, simple also and free app where the submitting invoices is actually or could be done digitally, right? But a lot of customers, they are still sending copied or printed invoices by post. And that's frustrating on both ends. For the customer, it means longer waiting times. I need to go out, right? I need to go to the post office, but also then for Allianz internally, because it creates a lot of manual work. You need to handle the paper, so it means a lot of inefficiencies. So there was a team that was looking into that, and they had already tried let's call them the classical marketing playbook, things like nice email campaigns, glossy brochures, all explaining how great this app is. But the problem was that the behavior barely moved. So that is when we got involved. And we started by working closely with the team to, as Anka said, right, really understand what was going on through this behavioral audit that we're doing. And that one also built on existing research that team has already done. And one insight that we found was that too many benefits were actually communicated at once. So the message that they wanted to send lost its impact. So in that case, then on top, the benefits were also rather broadly mentioned, which made it even harder for customers to kind of immediately see what's actually in it for them. So the challenge then came because we needed to get product developers on board, because the challenge there is that they naturally think about their product in a very comprehensive way. They want to showcase all the great situations in which their product could help.
Yeah.
But behaviorally, this often overwhelms people. And what actually works better, and there are studies out there, and we have also experienced it, is that one or two, or getting them to select one or two very concrete examples is way more effective. Because even though these exact examples are not a perfect match for every customer, for everyone, it still helps customers understand the value, and we are actually able to then mentally apply it to our own situations, right? And based on such insights, but also others, we then had another challenge, and that was, how do we now actually getting people's attention? And what we did in that project is that we choose a different channel, a postcard in that case. And compared to another email, the good thing about postcards is that they stand out. And it reaches customer also in a context where they're already dealing with mail, with invoices. So in other words, it creates salience at exactly the moment we wanted it to be, right? The right moment in time. And within that intervention channel, so the postcard, we then had different wordings that we tested in a really nice field experiment with a representative sample of actual customers. And all the different treatment arms basically were grounded in the insights from the behavioral audit. And the best performing postcard in the end included a personal reminder with a rather clear deadline, and reduced the friction by including a QR code to the App Store. So you can access the app or download the app immediately. And the nice thing about this project was that this postcard was able to increase app adoption by 20 percentage points, and
Wow.
was thus
Yeah.
then rolled out, I think, to more than, it was thousands of customers, 800,000 customers in the end.
Yeah, it's amazing, and really just to hear you talk about it, it's really resonating very deeply with me, or emotionally with me, because I know I'm being one of those people as well in what we do. With our platform, we can pretty much serve any interest or anything to do with human behavior. But I've recently just landed the plane on one point. Just how, how do you address human connection, and what's the benefit of that? And that's really easy for people to understand. And I think that's really the point that you're making. Yeah, there could be 10 or more benefits and financial uplifts and whatnot, but people just need it really simple.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, the interesting bit is that it is somehow counterintuitive, right? Eh, It's you don't expect it. You think the more information people have, the better they're informed, and the better they will know what they want, or how they're going to make that decision. But it's actually not like that, and we're still sometimes surprised how certain teams are still or we still need to convince them to make that point valid, right? And so it is really nice actually that we can test in such situations to really demonstrate and show that in this specific context, um, it makes a difference, and it works.
Yeah, I think there would be some people in a secondary phase of, doing a review might want to read more, very what we
Mm,
call information people. But
mm.
to get the message across as to why they should even take interest, it needs to be really simple. And I think you've really brought that out. So Ankar, you've also, worked in some, practical situations. So do you want to just talk about that as well?
Yeah, of course. So maybe I can talk about another example
Yeah.
that focused this time on employees, and it comes from the occupational health and safety area. So to give you a little bit of context, managers are generally responsible for taking care that nothing happens to their employees at the workplace, and they need to ensure that, for example, employees know what to do in case of an emergency, such as a fire. So managers and also team leaders have the duty, for example, to show emergency routes and exits to their employees. Of course, this is important, but it's also not so hard to understand that this can be annoying for managers because they already have many things to do, and it feels like one thing on top of their already very busy working days.
Yeah.
So what we observe is that managers either postpone these duties or they even ignore them. Now, in this setting, an external audit had been announced. So we really needed to make sure that managers know their responsibilities, but more importantly, that they also become active and fulfill their duties. And this is why our client brought us in and asked to help design the overall communication strategy. And for this purpose, we designed two different framings or communications. One approach built on risk aversion. So it emphasized that managers should try to avoid risks and negative outcomes. And the other framing, the social responsibility framing, emphasized that we are all one group, right? And that we should take care of each other. Now, maybe as you can imagine, our client had a strong preference for the social responsibility framing, because somehow they felt they wanted to talk to managers in a positive tone of voice and they didn't want to bother them too much. However, and luckily, they were at least willing to test both framings. So we could run a field experiment with a subset of managers. And what we found there was that the risk aversion framing outperformed the social responsibility framing a lot, which we could measure by the share of managers becoming active after receiving this communication. And it came as a surprise to our client, but the evidence convinced them, right? Like the data couldn't lie. So in the end, they decided to implement this risk aversion communication to the whole set of managers. It was around 10,000 managers all over
Wow.
one
Yeah.
country. And this proved again that testing is a very powerful tool to challenge assumptions we all might have, right? Including us. Sometimes we are even surprised ourselves of what we find. And that's why whenever possible, we try to keep the testing very high.
So the A/B testing is really important, essentially, to be doing that before a full rollout. And I think it's important for, I suppose, management and leaders to recognize that they might have some kind of emotional investment in a way in a particular solution because they think that's what's right, but in actual fact, it's not. And even, I suppose, even us as scientists will bring our own bias to the table as well as to what we think might be the right way of going, and it gets proven to be incorrect. And I find that happens a lot, around websites and the company message. I've got a particular slant, but it actually isn't. It's not the right one all the time, and I think that's what you're really bringing out with this.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I can bring one more example that just
Yeah.
came to my mind. So we also work on customer retention. And there, one of our clients was considering offering incentives to customers, like bonus points or small gifts, in order to keep these customers loyal during a phase of transition. And luckily, they brought us in early to first check how customers would actually react to these incentives. Now, we as behavioral economists, we know, right, that financial incentives do not always work the same way. And in some cases, they can send a wrong signal. And in this case, a customer might suspect that something is not going so well if a company needs to offer something, right, to stay. And that's actually exactly what we found in our test. So we compared different incentives to a control group where no incentive was offered, and the control group without incentive performed the best. Again, this was a big surprise for our client because they were convinced that more is better. But since they learned about this early enough, they could avoid implementing this costly benefits program. And it was a really good timing to figure that out early enough in this project.
So it does really highlight that financial incentives aren't necessarily the only path or going to be successful. There's got to be, what I call more intrinsic motivation.
Definitely, yes.
Is important for people to change. So maybe I'll sort of just change direction here a little bit. For you, Soraya, is how have you guys worked with the leadership teams to get them to see how to buy into this, to engage
Yeah.
in behavioral economics?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, because behavioral economics is sometimes perceived as this huge buzzword, right? But it's actually hard to explain what it does if you haven't experienced it directly. So we discovered early on that the most effective way to engage the leaders or top leadership even is by addressing their own decision-making behaviors. So I always say this is according to the principle, don't just tell someone, but show them, right?
Yeah.
So to facilitate this, we've developed a training. We call it the Executive Debiasing Program. And in this program, we basically draw on different behavioral science principles to help leaders recognize those kind of predictable decision traps that show up in their real world decision making. Things like overconfidence, right? Or planning fallacy. Which is the reason why projects so often take longer and cost more in that sense than expected. And in the program, we're not just educating the leaders about all those different barriers and traps, but we really give them thorough hands-on exercises and real examples. So they can experience how these patterns affect decisions and how they can manage them better the next time. And by doing this, we then create this kind of compelling entry point for getting them to integrate behavioral science or behavioral economics into different and important strategic initiatives, right? So, because once the leaders experience the personal value and also then later on the improvements in their own decisions, they are more or way more inclined to then, so to say, advocate for our services.
Because there's an ego that they've also got to get past. I think that we all think that, I mean, being direct, we all, I can't help it, but, we all have, our ego is in, and we all, is there in our decision making. I think everybody thinks that they're a great decision maker. And they
Yes.
don't necessarily see their biases, whether it's taking too much risk in particular situations, or just being too creative and changing everything all the time, or, not thinking matters through. Whatever the biases are, it's part of our makeup as humans. We all bring them to the table. And I suppose what you're really doing there is getting people to experience their own decision making and see perhaps how it could have been better. You know, to eliminate the blind spot, and it's up to them. Do you ever see anybody not buy in, even though they know the way that they're deciding and some of the decisions they've made is wrong? Do you see people still get pushbacks to that? Soraya, do you find that this is enough to show them what they've done? Or
I mean, yeah. I mean, so far, maybe it's not after the first session that we're doing, right? But sometimes it needs several or more engagements with them. And then one of it is, right, first of all, we need to convince them also to do this debiasing program, right? So this is one part of it. But then the other one is then also showing them and bringing to them kind of the impact that we were able to create in similar challenges, right? And so far, I mean, otherwise we wouldn't exist anymore, I guess. We were quite successful in getting this perspective across, or this insight across, that with our help, with our focus, with our expertise, we can actually make a difference, not only for the small things, but more and more also for the bigger things, for the huge projects, for the big transformation projects, for example, as well.
yeah, I think the financial returns that you talked about at the beginning of the conversation really prove it. The 17 times returns. And so now you've been so successful at going across all the internal divisions of Allianz globally that you're able to take the side out to the market and be more externally facing as a consulting firm. So, Anka, do you want to just talk a little bit more about that and what you've been doing, and the multi-industry services that you've been able to provide?
Yes, of course. So to say it very easily, so Decide by Allianz is a boutique consultancy that specializes on using behavioral economics to solve business challenges across industries, right? And maybe first of all, why did we decide to make this step, right? We could have maybe stayed internally. But what we observed was that there was a kind of market need to look at business challenges differently, like bringing in a new perspective. And we are convinced that behavioral science can exactly offer that. It's a very practical, a very evidence-based approach that brings in this new perspective on human decision making, which is crucial in so many areas. And it doesn't need to substitute traditional approaches, but it can be a very good complement, right? And another reason for going externally was that we realized we are working on many use cases, such as digital adoption or user experience, that are not unique to insurance, but that are faced by many different industries, such as telecommunication, media, healthcare, and so on and so forth. So that's why it felt natural to also move on. And I think what also influenced our decision was that many of us have a background in consulting. So it also felt a little natural to move on and to broaden our impact and provide our services more broadly and let more industries benefit from what we can help with.
Because digital adoption's a big problem, and the drop-off rates, I think, for almost any industry are still very large. You know, from the research I look at, you know, it's like a 65% drop-off rate. And if you can, which means poor engagement for whatever reason, you know, there's multiple reasons. If that can be improved, even 5 or 10%, it's a massive result. And you guys really sort of showed the example before of a 20% improvement. You know,
Yes.
with the postcard type example, you know, for the healthcare digital app. So I think it's, yeah, it's huge. And I think it's your leadership, you know, demonstrating how you've got this to the leaders and for them to understand and buy in. That really helps in going externally to show, you know, to show the path.
Yes, definitely. And maybe just to follow up on this digital adoption example. So what we've seen is that many companies invest heavily on designing and implementing digital self-service technologies, right? But unfortunately, adoption often remains far behind the expectations. And we think that's where behavioral economics can make a difference, because if we analyze the behavioral barriers behind, we see, for example, there is friction in the onboarding process, or we see there is way too many information in the interface, or there might just be a lack of trust in such a tool, right? And based on that, we come up with interventions that really tackle the root cause and can make a difference. And that's why we think we can also, offer our services much more broadly and across industries.
And so, Soraya, why don't you go forward with this on the opportunity that exists because of AI? Because I think this is, you know, really important now. And it's, well, I've got a second question to that, but I'll let you start on AI, and then I'll ask the big question
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah, so exactly, right? So we see that growing demand actually around AI, and because we all know, right? AI tools are rolled out quite at a high speed. There's a lot of pressure on organizations to keep up, and what we also learned is that something is always almost or is missed from those challenges, and it is human behavior, right? So what we did because of that is that we developed a framework, the so-called human, so HUMAN framework, and I won't go into it itself right now, but what it does is it allows us to kind of systematically uncover the right barriers that prevent those organizations or the organization that we're looking at from truly benefiting from AI. And maybe as an example, across the context we have looked so far, we see that there are things like low trust in AI outputs, right? But also then unclear personal or organizational value. We have, or there is fear of making a mistake when AI is involved. And on the other side, the other extreme is kind of this uncritical over-reliance, one could say, on AI, right? That kind of crowds out our human judgment. And so to change this, we need solutions that make AI easier, safer, more trustworthy, and also more intuitive. And in my opinion, the next breakthrough will not come from a smarter model alone, but from also technology that kind of is designed around human behavior.
Right. And I think that what you're, where I see that sort of led into the big area I see is that AI is full of bias itself based on, which is coming from the people that design the AI solution. Because at the end of the day, in a way, a lot of AI is not new. Maybe the way we're using it is new, but it's not new. But it comes from a human. At the end of the day, all AI is coming from a human somewhere, even if it's generative AI, and it's riddled with biases. And I think that's also why some people don't trust it. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and what I would call data cleansing or improving the data that feeds it, and humanizing that data, and that will be important.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm actually quite curious to see how all those insights from human behavior are going to be embedded into the new AI technology, because I don't think it is just about to make AI more human, right? It still is a machine. Everyone will know that. But I think their human behavior, or the theory behind it, can inform it in a quite nice way, so we can actually look at the right things and then decide whether we need to make it more human, and in what kind of areas this is actually the most relevant and important. Yeah.
So I think we're sort of getting up on time, and so I'm going to ask each of you, and I'll just start with Anka, just to tell us a little bit, just to conclude, what you see as exciting for the future, what you're looking forward to in the field of behavioral economics in the dynamic world we live in.
Yes, sure. So when I think of the future, what I would love to see is that behavioral economics is nothing special anymore, right? I don't want to explain anymore what it is. So I would love to see that behavioral economics becomes an integral part of organizations, and contributing to this evolution. That's something that excites me. And I think another interesting area, I'm a lot into public health, and I'm following up on the trends around non-communicable diseases as the main death reason. And this is so much linked to how we behave, right? Like how we eat, how we move, how we sleep, how we cope with stress, and so on. And if you ask people if they want to be healthy, of course they want to, right? That's not the question. It's not about intention. It's really about action. And so much in our choice architecture does not support healthy behaviors. And I would love to work more in this area, and via Decide, there will be more opportunities to strengthen also our contributions in the public health sector. And that's something that excites me a lot.
Yeah, and people are working on those solutions. Even if you go into the behavioral economics guide for 2025, which is where you had your article on the behaviorally
Yes,
informed insurance company. But there's one there from Deepak Patel in South Africa with around vitality, and that's
yes,
good. And he did one in 2023 as well. He did a podcast with me, and I think that might be good for you to look at that and then see where you can innovate. Um,
yes.
More, and there are going to be different ways to provide insurance policies that address those health issues. I'm actually helping someone design
Hmm.
that right now, because we know certain behaviors contribute to living longer, for example. Not only not being sedentary, but certain types of people from a personality perspective will live longer. So, it's quite interesting what's going to happen. So you're on the right area, I think, with longevity being a big trend.
Yes, definitely.
And Soraya, just to move to you, so how do you see the future and what excites you?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm obviously also really excited about this next chapter, and I think it's, for me, it's also about the opportunity to not only bring behavioral economics into this wider range of industries, but also contexts. So and I also want to apply it with a much stronger system lens, if
Yeah,
possible, because,
yeah,
right, in many real world settings, behavior is always shaped by somehow this huge web or the system, right? Incentives, constraints, alternatives, etc., etc. And when we face or focus only one of those actions or those behaviors in isolation, we then miss how the system will actually respond, right, in the whole, when we actually look to only change one of those actions or behaviors. So yeah, I could give an example here to make this a bit more clear. So I recently read a study about the desire to slow cars down to improve safety in areas where children were playing. And what they did was, and it's the intuitive response, they intervened directly on that road, right? They installed, I think it was speed bumps on the ground. And that can look successful if you just keep looking at this specific road. But what happened is that the drivers learned, right? They adapted because behavior doesn't exist in isolation. So they rerouted to the side roads where even more kids were playing. And the traffic then, or if the roads weren't designed for those higher traffic volumes. So this is a nice example how if one does not consider those wider system, an intervention can work locally, yes, but the problem is sometimes then displayed. And I really see now this big opportunity that with our expertise, we can really help organizations in kind of finding those dynamics and really design interventions or solutions that solve a problem, right, instead of shifting it somewhere else.
So making it far more strategic, I think, in terms of the solution, not just a tactical change in one area that, in a way, moves Spaghetti Junction to the next place, to the next spot. And yeah, I think that's exciting. And, I certainly resonate with everything that you guys have said today. And I hope as well, Onkar, that behavioral economics is not something we have to explain to leaders. And frankly, I'd like to see that in the future, behavioral science people are in the C-suite, and that is a key C-suite role. Less like we're starting to see the CIO be much more AI driven, behavioral science should be right up there. It's as important as technology or sales. It's key to it. And no decisions should be made or product implemented without it being infused with behavioral economics. So, and you guys have led the way. So let's ensure that continues to happen. So thank you for participating today.
Thanks a lot for having us. It was a pleasure.
Fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.